Okay? And Richard Manley, who's the liaison for the city council for the project. With that, here we go. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back with you again tonight. Just for clarification, I am the city council liaison. Keith Honey, I think most everybody in town knows Keith Honey, is our committee chairman. When we were invited a couple of months ago to come do this in anticipation of the conclusion of the comprehensive plan, Keith was on tap. His boss called him last week and said, I'm changing your plans for you. So Keith and his boss are elsewhere tonight, so it fell to me to, as the council liaison, to come and work with you tonight. Or excuse me, speak to you tonight. I asked David Willard as our city manager to come with me. Keith Bond's got the flu. He was supposed to be here with us, and also Sean, because he's the public information officer, and he was intimately involved in the process. Thank you, Chief. Everybody knows Chief Ladd, right? Sean was intimately involved in the work done by the comprehensive plan, and so he can help me out when I say something wrong. Folks, what I'm getting ready to tell you about, in my opinion, is probably the most important piece of work, legislation, ordinance, whatever you want to call it, to come out of the city in a couple of decades. There's been a lot of talk about master plans, comprehensive plans. I heard both as a citizen and once I was on the council. And as you'll see, it's been a lot of work by some very fine people on this project. About a year and a half ago, the council voted unanimously to engage with a group out of Dallas, a consultant group called Freeze and Nichols. They've done a lot of work with the city. They're a very competent group, and they do comprehensive plans like this all over the country. And we paid them $250,000 to do what you're getting ready to see. Now, the city of Austin paid well over $1 million for the same project, so I think we got a pretty good deal, actually. You're going to see a list of about 30 people. There have been a number of meetings that all these people have been involved in, and there have been probably 3 or 4 times as many meetings with Mr. Honey, myself, the city staff, and the liaison group from the consultants. Hundreds of hours have probably gone into this. What you're going to see is, I think, nothing short of visionary, and it's looking well down the road for our children and our children's children to make the city a better place. So let's get on with it. I want to thank Mike for making my 30-minute presentation 15 minutes now. Here's the list of people, and some real fine folks up here from all walks of life, old, young, black, white, all sections of town, all walks of life. Dr. Mack's brother, Ben Mack, general surgeon here in town, was on the committee also. Retired folks and young folks, real good group, very serious group. As you'll see, the metaphor here, it's a roadmap. It really is. This is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. This isn't the list of the streets we're going to pave next month or the budget for next year's fiscal year. This is, what's our city going to look like in 2025 and 2035? So as you can see, again, it's a long-term plan, and it's a big picture plan. Okay, so the process began with implementation, taking information in. You'd be proud to know that on a cold and rainy night in February last year, about 500 of your fellow citizens showed up at LeTourneau University for the first town hall meeting. And they got the original presentation of what this thing was all about. From there, we had a survey, and we had over almost 3,000 people respond to the survey. Now, that may not sound like a lot to a city of 85,000, which is kind of what I thought too, but the consultant said it's not typical or not atypical for 1 or 2% to respond. So they were thinking maybe a few hundred, and we got a few thousand to respond to this. And then we had another town hall meeting late last year, again, very well attended at Maud Cobb, to present the draft of what you're getting ready to see tonight. So again, phase 1 was the information gathering. Phase 2, the committee broke into 7. Now the 7th group is not on there, I'll tell you what it is in a second. 7 different subgroups, of which they were all members, and then other citizens, other people like you and me, contributed to the subcommittees. And these subcommittees were broken into the groups you might imagine: transportation, public safety, livability, economic development. And while there is some overlap, and you'll see some of that in a minute, those were the groups that were formed and the subcommittees met over the course of the summer and into the fall. The report was delivered to the committee about a month ago, and it is an extremely detailed report. I won't bore you with all the details. However, you can go to the website and see the entire report, and it is broken down into small increments, so you don't have to start at the beginning and leaf through it. You can find the area you're most interested in. As I'm sure you're not surprised, because there are a lot of people in here that have strong opinions about things, the people in this group had very strong opinions about things, and so the hardest part was to finish the vision statement. We never knew we had so many English grammar majors in the group, but as you can see, we try to touch on everything from the livability, our heritage, our environment, our people. We try to touch, or they tried to touch on everything, and I think did a nice job. Again, that's our vision. So, the draft report itself. At the end, we had over 160 objectives over those 6 or 7 subcommittees. They broke them down into short, medium, and long-term, short being 0 to 5 years. Again, remember this is a long-term plan. It's not going to happen tomorrow. We don't have the money, the time, or the resources to do it all at once. So short-term plan, 0 to 5 years, middle 5 to 10, long-term 10 and beyond. And then we identified the ones we want to do right away. So what they call first tier, okay, the dot thing. So how do you break it down? How do you go from 160 down to something manageable? They gave every member of the committee 7 little sticky dots, and all 160 objectives were up on the wall, and you got to go put one of the dots on each one of the objectives. And it was as simple as that, and broke it down. And these are the top tier, if you will. I'm not going to try to touch on all of them, but I hit a couple of high profile ones. The small area plan for revitalization of South Longview. That's basically I-20. There are some, as you may have heard, there was an I-20 task force last year. This dovetails into that, and the fact that there are a lot of opportunities along I-20, and we'll talk about annexation in just a minute, that the city and the council and the fellow citizens have all said we want to focus on. So we're going to roll in after the comprehensive plan and look at both the I-20 corridor and the downtown area specifically for revitalization and redevelopment. Demolished dilapidated buildings. All of us are property owners in Texas. It's very important to us, and I'm a landlord too. I don't like somebody telling me what to do, but we as citizens in this town have decided that, at least the majority have spoken, and the ones I've talked to, is that we want to get these buildings taken care of. So there's probably going to be some ordinance changes, so that if you have a building next door to your house that's just falling down around itself, and we don't have the power through any kind of ordinance to do something about that, we have hopes that we can have some ordinances that will help you there. I think that we all want to be proud of our city and feel like we need to have a minimum level of maintenance of a building, whether it's commercial or residential. And I think you'll see that coming down the pipe. I mentioned the downtown plan also as a redevelopment. Annexation. Annexation was the last of an 8-day series of articles in the newspaper. I never got a phone call till after the last one, and all my phone calls were about annexation. A lot of folks got surprised by this. Annexation is not going to happen the day after we sign off on the comprehensive plan. Annexation is something that any city that's growing has to plan long-term. Where are we growing? Where do we need to prepare? And while we had a lot of negative karma at that meeting where the annexation was discussed, I had just as many people call me and say, we look forward to being annexed, we'd like to have additional services, and let me just tell you right now that as we go forward, there will be a lot of conversation about this. It's not going to happen right away, and we'll listen to what everybody has to say. But when you look at the natural growth of the city at 259, that's more than likely where we'll go first, and look to move up there. Big stumbling block there, Tryon Road Water District. They have some very specific things they're doing. That's going to be difficult, and it's going to take some real open conversation and give and take to make that happen, if it can happen. Again, annexation doesn't happen just because we want it to. Along I-20, a lot of folks don't know this. I didn't really know this till we got into it. The city only has 1 mile on I-20 that we can develop. It's basically Estes to East Monroe. Everything west of that is in the city limits, but it's in the Sabine River. You can't do anything with it. So as we look to try to find a way to Emphasize I-20, capture some of those 100,000 cars going by every day and have them stop at our restaurants and our hotels and maybe drive into town and partake of other things within our city. We need to look at possibly annexing east of Eastman Road, probably out to the loop. And by the way, all these annexations are very focused, like for example on the loop. We're not going to look, when you hear about annexation, the plan is not to say, let's go from the city limit and take everything that's from the city limit all the way out to the loop, like Longview Heights and everything in between. It's let's stay along the corridors. This is primarily more of a commercial thing, right? Where you've got the opportunity to capture some of the growth as the city grows. And so anyway, those are the three areas you're most likely to see an annexation. And again, they are years out. I would say probably 5 years before anything happens with any of these, because it takes a lot of planning and also a lot of money to make it happen. Guidelines for new development along the lines of what I said a minute ago about ordinances. The trail system, there is a master plan for the trails. Anybody walk on Borman Trail or any of the other trails? No. On a pretty day, it's like I-35 driving to Austin, isn't it? It's one of the most utilized things that we have. We have a master trail system. Part of the comprehensive plan will be to complete the master trail system and to look at other things like Lear Park, to complete Lear Park, maybe connect that with the trail system. Again, it takes money, it takes time, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but you got to think big, and this plan thinks big. Interesting phrase I'd never heard before called a road diet. These three cities are the entrance to our city from I-20, and they're not especially pretty for any of us that drive up and down these roads, right? So a road diet would say, let's take an old 4-lane road, convert it to 3 lanes, put bike lanes in, put in landscaping, and so that when people visit our city, coming to look to either move here or visit our city, they're coming through an entrance or coming along an entrance that is beautiful and attractive and inviting. And those are the 3 streets that the consultants thought we could use as major corridors into our city. And again, it's called road diets. The fire stations are kind of obvious. As we grow, we need one more fire station right now, actually. The public facilities, the police station, the police are busting at the seams. They're actually having to rent the building behind the main station for training. And City Hall also is kind of busting at the seams. Bike lanes and sidewalks I touched on earlier. Downtown parking. Everybody knows about Judge Stout's plans for a parking facility. This comprehensive plan thing is something that has gone on in several cities. Our Chamber of Commerce has sponsored intercity visits to Chattanooga, Fort Collins, and Greenville. All 3 cities were cities that went from good to great. Walter Cronkite, and those of us have a little gray in our hair and remember who Walter Cronkite was, in 1969 said Chattanooga is the dirtiest and filthiest city in the United States. The next day, 50 people from Chattanooga said, we're going to change this. They had their 30-night overnight success story, as they call it. They have a $20 million aquarium donated by a family in downtown Chattanooga. They have of course, they have a river that we don't have, but they have totally redeveloped downtown Chattanooga in this beautiful place. Greenville, South Carolina, the last trip, and I would also say that Greenville is the most like Longview of any of the 3 cities, had a plan of mixed-use facilities that incorporated city money, county money, economic development money, private money, and sometimes federal money. If we could develop a plan like that, we could have a downtown parking facility right in the middle of downtown where the judges, the county's parking lot is right now, maybe incorporate something with petroleum building, tear that down, replace that. Again, think big, think mixed use, think retail, public, private partnerships, and you can perhaps accomplish something like that right downtown in Longview. And again, I talked about mixed use there. And I-20 we've already touched on. Finish Lear Park. There are 8 ballparks that need to be finished. Miracle Park, Miracle Field, which is a great nonprofit. I recommend you please donate to it if you can. This is a Miracle Park. It's going to be the ballpark for the handicapped kids. My wife and I donated to it. We think it's a great thing. And there's 7 other ballparks to be finished. It's not going to cost that much. We could do it relatively easy. I think 1.5, 1.6 million. I know it's not cheap, but at the same time, sports tourism is a big asset for our city. And if we could complete Lear Park, that would be a really big deal, and that's also part of the comprehensive plan. And we put in 2 miles of sidewalks on downtown and the south side of town. And the reason why is kids walk into those schools. Kids go into those schools, walk to school. There's not a lot of moms and dads that take them to school. So here's the plan, February 17th. I'm sorry I keep turning my back to you because that little screen up there, I can't read it. February 17th, P&Z has to approve it first because, again, there's going to be some ordinance changes, some future land use changes from what currently exists. They'll vote on it first, and it'll come to us in March, and then we'll begin implementation. So what can I ask of you? Hold our feet to the fire. If you believe in what the comprehensive plan is all about, and I hope you do, and even if you don't agree with everything, if you think that Longview can be better, if you think Longview can be more attractive, if you think Longview can just be a better place and we can start working on that right now, you need to hold our feet to the fire. The worst thing we could do is to take this $250,000 plan, put it in a nice leather notebook and put it on the shelf, right? We need to start it right now, and I know that our city manager and his staff are committed to that, and I know our council is, and I hope y'all are too. Of course, the biggest challenge becomes how do you pay for it? And therein lies the rub, but I have a lot of confidence in our council and our city leadership to make sure that we'll do this pragmatically as we move into the future. So that's what I have to say. Anybody have any questions? And I'm going to ask David and Sean to come up. Yes, sir.
Are you aware of the city county government of Indianapolis and Marion County? They adopted that
So you're saying that Indianapolis did the same kind of comprehensive plan we're planning? Yes, sir. And did it work?
It's working.
Okay. You know, when you start a plan like this, sir, what we found is that people come out of the woodwork. I'm sure some of you are sitting out here right now saying, I have ideas, I have things that I would have liked to have had input. I mean, the things you're thinking, other people have likely had. We've had enormous input from your citizens about the things that are on this plan. And again, I would encourage you, if you have the time, to go to the website and find it and have a look. But you'll be hearing more about this as we go into the immediate future. But I think Indianapolis is a great town. I also did not realize they had a comprehensive plan, but I'm not surprised. It's a good town. Anyone else? You can take it easy on Wednesday night? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Well, it's kind of a hard act to follow when you have a whole citywide plan to talk about. But the beauty of what I'm going to share with you tonight is how you take a big picture idea, like the city's comprehensive plan, and make it work for the area where you live. Many of you know that citizens, just like yourself and me, used to sit around the kitchen table and talk about ways we could make things better in the places where we live. And you've heard me tell the story about how Go West was started because several of us wondered what was happening to the retail and commercial enterprises of the Pine Tree area and what could we do to stop the decay that we saw going on around us. Well, talking about things is good, but action is so much better. And we formed together a group and said, we've got to turn the tide. We've seen how this cycle works. We've seen what's the decay that's happened on the south side of Longview, and we don't want that coming our way. So we've taken steps in Go West to change some of the economic development initiatives in this area. But one of the best things I think we've been able to do is several of us from Go West volunteered to be on this committee for the comprehensive plan because we wanted to make sure that our area, our neighborhoods, got the attention that they deserved. And well, though you didn't see Highway 80 listed up there, Highway 80 is a spine for Longview, Texas, and it's going to get the attention. It's not only going to get the attention from the comprehensive plan, but so many of the stories that have come from Highway 80 are affecting other groups in our community, like the sex trafficking that you're going to be hearing about next month. This is a passion point for Zonta International. And these ladies have come together to say, we're stopping that. We are not going to accept that in our neighborhood anymore. And as you know, Highway 80 is a hotbed for that sort of activity. So we're bringing all sorts of elements together to change the future of West Longview. And I can't tell you how happy I am about this comprehensive plan. So, because you're going to want to know how it fits right into where you live, I'm going to share with you what I know. The comprehensive plan has many elements, and the way it's going to fit best for us in West Longview is in addressing some of our entryways. We have 3 major entryways to the city of Longview in West Longview. We have Spur 31, we have Highway 80, and we have Gilmer 300. And the sheer number of cars that come up and down those roads, it's just astounding to me. And it's really astounding when you look at all the development going on in other places in our city, because we've got the traffic counts in West Longview. We've got the beds, heads in beds, as they say about in marketing speak. We have one of the largest sections of homeowners in the city of Longview concentrated in West Longview. So why aren't we getting the attention we deserve? Where are our elected officials advocating for us in this avenue? Well, I'm happy to say that our city council has stepped up, and I'm hopeful that our next generation of city council membership and our mayors will say, we will carry this forward. We're not going to let South Longview, West Longview, East Longview decay. We'll work together to make things happen. So entry points will be a key part of that. Fire and safety will be huge. As many of you know, our area is sort of landlocked, and it's older, and we have a lot of aging infrastructure. Well, it's about time we addressed that and found ways to improve what we have so that our investment, the homes that we bought, the businesses that we own, are supported by our city and our county, and allowing us to have the liberty to do what really needs to happen, and that is the business community needs to step up. There's only so much that we can ask of our city and our county to provide, but it's really going to be entrepreneurs that I think turn the pages for us. But I think I've jumped ahead. Let me get back and tell you that related to the comprehensive plan and all the changes that Richard was telling you about, you're probably wondering, like I am, how in the world are they going to plan for all of the work that needs to be done? And we're talking roads, infrastructure, parks, bike lanes, the very things that the people of Longview have spoken up and said that they want. How are we going to pay for that? Well, you might be surprised to know I have an answer. And it's called a magic wand. That's all we need. It's really quite simple. Just a magic wand. We close our eyes, blink, and it's all better. Do you believe me? Of course you don't. You know, just like I do, that nothing good comes easily or free. We are going to have to work together. We are going to have to sacrifice, put aside some differences that we might have to work together to make the good things happen for not just West Longview, but the whole of Longview together. And that might mean some bumpy roads. Nobody likes being told what to do. And nobody likes having somebody come in and say, your business is decaying, you need to fix it up, you need to paint that, you need to take out those weeds that are an eyesore to your community. Well, we're independent, maverick sort of folks here in East Texas. We don't like folks saying that. And yet at the same time, we know that that's bad for business. I mean, think about all the places you like to travel to and you like to go visit. Well, they're beautiful, and they sort of match. Have you ever noticed sometimes when you go to places that the bike trails lead to a really beautiful retail area, which then lead to a development area, and you feel like you could walk from one place to the other? Well, that didn't happen with a magic wand. It happened when people got together, just like we're doing here, and agreed to work to make good things happen for their community. Not just for themselves, although that's a big part of it because, you know, I'm 50 years old and I'd like to live in a place that I can walk around and go have dinner with my friends from here and maybe go to the library later. But more important than that, I want a place that my kids would choose to come back to, and that they would want to live here, and that they would want to raise their families. So it's going to take a lot of work from you and me, our elected officials, our business leaders, the entrepreneurs that we want to have thrive in our area. We're all going to have to work together, and we're going to have to kind of suck it up and think hard about how we're going to improve these properties. And if it takes an ordinance, it's going to have to maybe take an ordinance to change some things, but it's for the betterment of our overall good and for making Longview the beautiful city that it needs to be. I heard Dale Lunsford, the president of the Laterno Universities, describe Longview to someone. He said, that the university is located in the most beautiful part of the state of Texas. Shouldn't Longview be the most beautiful city in the most beautiful part of the state of Texas? I couldn't agree more. And so that's why I'm willing, as one of the Go West members, to say, let's do it. Bring it on. What do we need to do to make our roads better? Do we need to see about trying to bury power lines? Do we need more sidewalks? How can we connect those parks that we already have, like at Juliana? How do we connect that to McWhorter? And maybe find a way to connect it back down to Lear Park, so that when you get on the bike trail and you ride your bike, you have a place to go. You have a destination in mind. I think with a lot of creative minds can come together, we can find those solutions, we can work together, we can make those things happen so that our property values increase. We have a great sense of pride in our community. The story of who we are has been told, and it's a great place for our kids to come back to. So one of the things I'd like to encourage you about is read the plan. Nobody likes to get blindsided by information. And though I feel like I know it well because I've been involved with it since it started, many of you may be hearing about it for the very first time tonight. And there's a lot of information to digest. I ask you, as a citizen, don't be a spectator to this. Get involved, read, understand, ask questions, call your elected officials. That's what they're there for. They need to be able to explain to you how this is going to affect you. When is it coming to your neighborhood? What is the master plan here? And knowing you and knowing what an active group and a body of supporters you are for the American way, I know you will. One of the things I'm going to encourage you about is in the comprehensive plan, once it gets past planning and zoning, and once it gets approved by city council, there's going to be an interesting series of developments that I see happening, and this is where Go West is going to play a big part. And that is in a small plan advisory approach, task force, if you will, where a group of committee members, maybe some of you, maybe me, maybe our council representatives, we get together and we figure out how can we best affect change on Highway 80. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. You know that you go zipping along Highway 80 at 50 miles an hour, you don't pay any attention to the businesses on either side, you're kind of frightened, you're praying that your car doesn't break down. I mean, let's be honest. And that's not the way it needs to be. We need to have a vibrant business community, particularly in that area where Pine Tree Road and Highway 80 intersect. That used to be the hotbed for Gregton, Texas. And we still have a shopping center that's sort of an ode to a time past. Well, it's decaying, it's falling in on itself. It can hardly be rented to a legitimate business. We need an investor to come in there and buy that building. We need to see that turned around and useful again, repurposed for a new generation. Well, I'll be honest, I can't be that investor. I'm trying to put 2 kids through school. So if one of you wants to step up, let's chat. But the point is, it's going to take private money. We need investors. We need entrepreneurs who can catch this vision for what that triangle can be for the next generation. I'm seeing a place, and maybe you've seen it too in other cities, where there are bistros and boutiques and entrepreneurs can have their quirky businesses. We don't need another big box store in that corner. We want a place where mavericks, East Texans, can put the businesses and make them thrive. And we need to create a small area plan that allows them to do that, gives them the liberty to expand their businesses and do what they need to do. And I think we can see that come out as a growth of the comprehensive plan. One of the things I just love, and that is that I love to celebrate the businesses that have chosen to thrive in West Longview. Maybe you know the story of Longview Lawn and Garden. They've been a heritage business in West Longview. And they outgrew their space. And I'm not gonna lie, they had golden opportunity to move to another part of town, safer, better traffic counts, probably less expensive, and they chose to stay. Not only did they choose to stay on Highway 80, they built up. Stop by their business. Thank them for choosing to stay in West Longview, to reinvest against all the odds, and now their business is even doing better than projected. We have a new convenience store, massive, beautiful convenience store on the corner of Loop 281 and Highway 80, where there used to be one of the biggest eyesores in our city. I mean, you've seen it, those green metal buildings. You used to go by like this, praying that when you would bring guests to town that they wouldn't notice. Well, thank the good Lord, that's gone. And in its place, we have a vibrant new business that not only will meet the needs of the neighbors in that area by being able to provide the convenience store, we'll have a beautiful gas station with a super speedy car wash. I've been told that that'll be the fastest car wash in the city, so if you're somebody like me that doesn't like to wait in lines, this could be your place. It's just wonderful to me. And Juicy's. Did you know that the Maxis that own Juicy's hamburgers, their offices are on Highway 80? They look at some of these eyesores every day. And instead of walking away and going to a different part of the city to reinvest, they're buying the taco casas on Highway 80 and reinvesting right here in our neighborhood. That's what the future of Longview is. That's what the future of West Longview. Private money working together with what we've got going in the master plan to create the new future for our city. I know you want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. I'm asking you, be engaged in the process. Read the comprehensive plan, ask the questions, attend the meetings, call your elected officials. Be a part of the change. Be a citizen, not a spectator. Thank you.
All right, that's kind of the part of the presentation that they had that they brought to talk about. I'm going to go ahead with the microphone here. If you have questions, I'd like to see the city folks come up and Kimberly come up. If you have questions, they can speak into the mic here, and I'll come along with the portable microphone and you can get your questions asked. So, anybody have any more questions? Okay. Yeah, you need to come up, you bring your wand and come on up here and use this speaker right here.
Hello. My question is more directed toward Mr. Manley. Are you familiar with the Texas Gang Assessment Report? And are you aware that Longview is number 13 out of the top 20 most dangerous cities in Longview, or in Texas, excuse me? And what would you do differently from the current leadership to address this rising crime that's happening in our city?
This is Mike Hop. Yes.
Okay, so the answer to the first question, the gang report, I'm not familiar with that. Certainly familiar, I think we all are, with the fact that the city is on this list now. We've had a pretty sharp spike in crime. Anybody that reads the paper knows that. It happened in November, December, happened again in January. And it's not something that's not happened before. Again, I think the paper reported today that this happened again. This happened before in early 13 and happened again in 2012. We hope it's an aberration. Having said that, there are some very specific things in place and plan to address this. One of our citizens, speaking kind of to what Ms. Fish said about citizens getting involved, one of our citizens, a gentleman by the name of Ray Wade, who owns a barber college on the south side, he actually ran for District 3 a few years ago and lost to Cassia Williams, called for a community meeting, which was held at Heritage Plaza. Had about 50, 60 people come out on a very cold night. And why is that important? I mean, what got accomplished in something like that? When these kind of things happen, what you lose is trust. The people that live in these neighborhoods that are victimized by crime, I don't know if y'all live in these neighborhoods. I don't live in that neighborhood, so I certainly can't say I understand. What we have to be is sensitive to what they're dealing with. And so, as the mayor said, who was there Friday night, and I'm going to try to speak specifically to what we're trying to do here, he said, listen, it's hard, but you who live in these neighborhoods have to speak out. You have to find a way to get the word out. If there's a crack house 4 houses down from you, no one's asking you stand up and take an interview with a newspaper, and like that one brave lady did, Lillian, whatever her name was, she said, I'm not afraid of those guys. But a lot of people are. So we have to find a way to build that trust. Well, it's not unusual, you're probably not surprised to hear, that in the black community and the Hispanic community in this town, there is no trust. Now, some of that's cultural. A lot of folks who came from south of the border, whether it's Mexico or Central America, the federales, the police are corrupt. So they come to the United States, they don't know any better. So, one generation down the line, people understand, but the people who came here fairly recently, there is no trust. And because of some of the things that have happened, there are some communication issues between our police and some of our minority citizens. So I'm proud to say that Mr. Willard and Chief Dingler have already started the process through the police area representatives, the PAR officers. These are the men and women who patrol the streets and do nothing but just like you used to see in the movies, where the cops walking down the street, swinging the whatever. People know they're driving in a car, but people know these people. Whether it's big old John Rawls, if you know him, or Misty, who I saw today, who's up here in this area for the city. They are trying to plug in with the people that live in these areas. Now, beyond that, what I've asked the city manager and Chief Dingler to do, and Cassia Williams, who's the council representative from District 3, and I have asked to find a way to initiate a meeting in the community, and probably be held at Broughton Park. Now, here's the problem. We've done this once before. I think it happened a couple of years ago when we had the last kind of spurt in crime. Nobody came. Nobody came to Broughton Park for the same reason I just mentioned. So what I've asked them to do is to think differently. And I know that Mayor Dean feels the same way, and we've got to do something different. And whether that means we go back to putting people on bicycles, because we had people on bicycles at one point in time. I didn't know that. You guys knew that. But in that part of town, there were 3 or 4 men and women that actually patrolled on a bicycle. Not unlike the policeman walking down the street on the sidewalk. We've got to find a way to build people's trust so they can feel comfortable telling us what they need to tell us without fear of retribution. Whether that retribution is a rock through their window or a bullet through their door. And there's only one way to do that, and that's through communication. So I've asked them to try to start the dialogue. Where it's going to go, I don't know. I don't think there's a magic wand. I don't think there's a city plan, something we can conjure up at City Hall and all say grace over that's going to be the answer. The answer is going to come from you, the citizens, whether you live in that area or somewhere else, or whether you're being victimized by crime or not. We have to communicate with you. And the ideas have to come from you. Because I've learned over the years, whether that was in the Marine Corps, working with a basic corporal, or one of my NCOs, or in business, the best ideas don't come out of the CEO's office, they come out of mine. They come from the people that are living it every day, and that's the people who are living in these neighborhoods and our police officers. Did I answer your question?
Yes, can I send you the information on the gang assessment?
Yes, thank you. Would you mind after the meeting, if you would give that to Sean Harrell, please, and we'll investigate it, and we'll get your phone number. And Mike and Cindy, let's make sure that we communicate the information in such a way that it gets back to the entire membership next month. Okay? Thank you for asking the question. Any other?
I'm up. Okay, I'm right here, over here, over here. This is a question for our city reps. All right, on the comprehensive plan, if you had a guess and predict which ones will happen first on the spending issue, the parks, the beautification projects, the parking garage, all these things, what would your guess, simple guess, be that this will happen first, second, third, fourth? Just give me a top 3 or 4. A guess, not an estimate, just a wild guess.
First of all, I'm glad I'm the city manager, not the head coach of Seattle Seahawks.
It was just a guess.
Yeah, that's a guess. I think I'd like to point out that there are a lot of things that you will see that really don't carry a price tag per se on them that we can do fairly quickly. A lot of administrative things that we can do, such as the zoning issues within neighborhoods, economic development issues where we're trying to recruit businesses in here and try to match them up with the proper zoning and things of that nature. A lot of planning's already been done in the economic development portion of the planning of this plan. LEEDCO, the Longview Economic Development Corporation, it's been up and running for several years. That's already done, and we just need to kind of expand and continue to recruit businesses, because that's the best way to increase the economic engine of the city and help us all keep tax rates low, is to increase that. So a lot of the things that you'll see really don't carry a price tag, that we can do a lot of things administratively first. But as any public works projects, they're going to be expensive. We were just completing a $52 million road project that the voters asked us to go forward with in 2011. And so that sounds like a lot of money, but and we're covering a lot of ground in those roads, so to speak, but it just takes a lot of money to make a dent in it, so to speak. So I would think that would need to come as direction from the city council in the future to see where they want to prioritize that, and I'm sure citizens groups will be part of those decisions as well. But and the other thing I'd like to point out, that when you do a lot of these big projects like that, where you go to the voters approve it, just like the street bond project, 52 million. Those are paid for and funded by general obligation bonds, and a tax rate that you've noticed on your tax bill goes to pay for the debt service on those bonds. And what a lot of people don't realize or think about is that once those projects are paid for, that tax goes away. Now, you may vote another bond or whatever to go forward, but it's not like that it just goes into the tax base and gets lost in there forever. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about and weighing those options on general obligation bonds and how we pay for those projects. It's specifically targeted for that, and then it goes away after that project per se is paid for. So that would be my guess.
Well, I'm going to guess parks, bike trails. That's one of the things so many people in the city of Longview have come forward and said that they want more of. They want better bike trails, hike and bike trails. They want them connected, and they want to see a destination in mind so that they can go out and go more than just up and down, up and down, up and down. I mean, if you walk the Paul G. Borman, it's wonderful. It goes about 2 miles, and then you have to turn around and go back. So the people of Longview have spoken out, and that's what they're saying they want to see. Now, whether the city council and the city manager's office prioritize that as the first thing that we go after, who's to say? But numbers of people have responded through their survey, through public meetings, that this is critically important. It's their favorite part of Longview. It's the thing they bring their families to when they visit, and they want to see more of it. And we want it in West Longview.
Let me say one more thing too, specifically, because she picked there's 3 things I think will happen very soon. First of all, let me compliment the city manager and his staff. We've actually reduced debt and reduced debt service in this city over the last 4 or 5 years. And I've had a lot of help with the people that manage our funds externally, but also good leadership. Angela Cohen, our budget director, is first class. She's as good as anything you'll find in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio. And she's excellent. Okay, so 3 things. She went to Parks and Rec. One of the things that we learned in Chattanooga and in Greenville, they said, listen, to make your comprehensive plan successful, you got to validate it. Pick some low-hanging fruit and get early successes. The long-term plans, as the city manager alluded to, the big projects, those take time, they take money, and they take your vote. There's some things that we can do. Parks, we have a master plan, as I said, be relatively easy and in relative terms, relatively inexpensive. 2 other things, downtown redevelopment and redevelopment along I-20. We've had an I-20 task force. We got that old hotel torn down and a city and county and, well, primarily city and LEEDCO money. We have high hopes for that piece of land. But the redevelopment along I-20 is a very high priority for our city council, again, from your direction as a citizenry. And then downtown. When we had the second town hall meeting, everybody that came, well, almost everybody, I think we ran out, got little clickers. So when they listed, okay, here's an option. Like it a lot, like it a little, medium, hate it a little, hate it a lot, all right? The most popular thing was redevelopment of downtown, and yes, I'd like to see our tax money go to it, and I would, yes, even consider a small incremental tax in that area if I was to buy something down there, buy a meal downtown, and we're talking about 1/4% maybe. Knowing that that tax and that money would go directly back into that area of downtown Longview. So downtown redevelopment, I-20 redevelopment, and Parks and Rec, I think would likely be the first 2 or 3.
I asked a question about the cost. Does it go away? And I see the city's moving forward with the animal shelter. And so I was wondering what the city's estimate were for increase in annual cost to operate the animal shelter in terms of utilities, insurance. I see the city's gonna have employees to operate it now, so you've got salaries and benefits and maintenance on the facilities. So that's a fixed cost being added to the city budget that's gonna go up from now on. So I know you made some projections, so what do they look like?
Thank you, that's a good question. As you know, the animal shelter is going forward with the construction. The construction part is going to be paid for. Gregg County has committed $2.5 million to the project, and the city of Longview has committed the balance of that money. We're going to be paying cash for our portion. I think Gregg County also is as well. So we're going to be paying cash funding for the construction of it. The operations, you know, it's a very good question, because a lot of times we want to build things and have new pretty things, but we need to always remember what it's going to cost to operate them. That's an additional cost that goes on and on and on. And we are projecting right now that net increased cost to the city of Longview is going to be somewhere the first year about $750,000 to $800,000 of increased cost. Now, net increase, we think about $1.5 million annual operating expense to operate that facility, but we'll have contracts with adjoining cities for their animals, as well as the county, and the city we're planning to operate our animal control operation out of that facility as well. So we will have a net increase. We take very seriously trying to fund our core services, public safety, which I think the animal control and animal shelter is a public safety issue as well. Fire, police, streets, roads, water, sewer, all of those things we see as our core functions, and we think we have the resources to find the money in the next budget year. It's going to be a challenging budget year coming up. We start that process in May, and we'll present a new budget which will include some of that cost to the city council in July and the first part of August. We are going forward with trying to do a search for a director. It'll take about a year for us to build the shelter, and there's a lot of startup, operations getting ready for that. So, I guess to answer your question, about $800,000 in there of net new increased cost to the city for that.
So that was your first year, was it $1.5 million a year?
I'm sorry?
It was $800,000 for the first year, is what I heard you say. But in subsequent years, I thought I heard you say $1.5 million.
Well,
Did I hear that wrong?
I'm sorry, let me explain. The annual operating cost is $1.5 million a year to operate the shelter. But net, we already spend money, on animal control and what we've been paying our contract with the Humane Society. So that money will just be shifted to the cost of the animal shelter. So our net increase of new city money to spend operates about the $800,000 figure, but the total operating costs are about $1.5 million. Now, over time, hopefully, there's a lot of interest in donations, charitable giving toward a new animal shelter and the continued operations. I've been very amazed since the time the council voted to go forward. In fact, I had a gentleman in my office that came in today that wants to bequeath money to the city for operations going in the future today, and I think. And that's kind of the unknown to balance that out. And I hope the community will step up where they're passionate about that. And I think we'll see a lot of charitable donation and volunteer work. And we want to build our volunteer base where hopefully we will reduce some costs, through that method. So maybe that was a little bit clearer. Okay.
Next one over here.
if you're talking about long-term goals and income to the city and that sort of thing, one thing I haven't heard you talk anything about is the medical community. We've got 2 big hospitals here. Does the city have anything to do with coordinating things or advertising or do anything to enhance the city, you know, through those 2 hospitals?
They looked at me and said, "Do you want to do that one?" Sure. It's a relatively simple one in that really those 2 entities are pretty well completely separate from the city. The county has more involvement, you know, with the Good Shepherd more than anybody. But as far as our direct involvement, they pretty well operate independently from the city. So obviously they're an important partner, and so we work closely with them on a lot of things. But in terms of direct budgetary issues, yeah, they're pretty separate.
I'm curious, what were you thinking? Do you have something in mind? Do you have an idea of maybe you'd like to see the city do something?
Just that, you know, those bring in a lot of money to the city, I would imagine, just going to the city.
Yeah, so it's really important that they both survive and thrive, is what you're headed to? Is that what you're saying? That they both do well, both hospitals.
It was a medical allusion there, survive and thrive. I want to just say something real quick that has become very apparent to us who volunteered to work on the comprehensive plan, and also those of us who've traveled with the Chamber of Commerce to look at other cities and how they've redeveloped and one of the ideas that they fostered that were so successful. And I'm going to be real honest. Every one of those cities has something that we don't have in Longview. And it's something that we desperately need, and we can so easily cultivate it. And that is a philanthropic component. Every city we've visited that has, like Indianapolis and some of these other places, the city and the counties that were engaged, they didn't fund this massive renovation of culture and lifestyle and appearance. Most of the money that got poured into those projects came from private dollars. They came from generous benefactors, private citizens who gave small amounts but were passionate about a topic. And they gave generously, willingly, and often. And because of those gifts, amazing things happened. And when we think about the plans for Longview, the comprehensive plan is really sort of a skeleton, and you'll see this when you look more closely at the book. It really just sort of addresses the basic things that the city government already does, they just need to do better. But where we need to come together as citizens, and we need to pull together our financial resources, are on the things that are important to us that make it where we want to live. Maybe you want another shot at an arena. Maybe you'd like to see a bigger library. Things that affect your quality of life. We're going to need philanthropic giving. We're going to need private resources to come along and offset what the city and the county can only do what's their job to do. We don't want them doing more than what they're authorized to do. It's going to be us getting together, giving, thinking, working to make the really wonderful things happen that are going to make Longview the best place to live in East Texas.
Okay, question? Richard, I'd like to ask you whether any thought has been given to the idea that some of the items in the prioritization list will have leverage, positive leverage on other items. And I'll give you a simple example. If we could begin a campaign to dramatically reduce the number of rundown and derelict buildings, those are the items in the city that impound and impact rather the first impression of somebody coming into town with the idea of maybe opening a business. And so that would have leverage on the attractiveness of the town for newcomers. And there's probably many other instances like that that could be identified. But if you just go forward on who's pushing the hardest and who's ringing the bell the loudest, we may miss some of those opportunities. And so my question is, has that element of this program, this plan, been addressed?
Michael, thank you. The short answer, of course, is yes. The 6 or 7 subcommittees you saw on one of those slides, there's some obvious overlap. And for example, transportation, if we have a road that has a lot of traffic, maybe we need to consider about making that a one-way street. And when you make it a one-way street, maybe make it a 3-lane street with a bike lane. And Ms. Fish alluded to underground utilities. There are already some things underway. For example, the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, has already passed that every major thoroughfare, so in the future, think the new George Ritchie or something like McCann and Judson and others, will have sidewalk, right-of-way, underground utilities, bike lane, 2 lanes, median, and the same thing in reverse. All future major thoroughfares will look like that. So we'll no longer be faced with roads like Gilmer Road, where everything just kind of grew up all of a sudden hodgepodge. One of the things also, Michael, that we talked about was, and I had it on the slide, I skipped over just in the interest of time. Again, you look at, and I'm not to pick on anybody that has a business on Gilmer Road, but if you drive from Gilmer Road from the loop all the way up, you know, there's really there's no plan to it. There's no organization to it. Now, you can compare that to the new plan that's called nodes. So if you have a major intersection, call it George Ritchie and Gilmer Road, that's where you'll find a gas station, maybe a CVS or a Walgreens. Next to that may be a small Walmart or a grocery store. Moving further away from that intersection might be an apartment complex, and further away would be a single-family home neighborhood. And as you move toward the next, let's say we're going east on Gilmer Road and you're approaching McCann Road, and the same thing works in reverse, so that you have nicely appointed buildings, well-landscaped buildings, so you have a nice-looking road, and 20 years from now, when George Ritchie has been completed, you have a feel of a neighborhood as you drive through it, instead of just a hodgepodge. That leads to all sorts of, when you have a plan like that, then you have people that want to be here, they want to be part of the growth on George Ritchie Road, they want to build houses. We already have 2 or 3 housing developments planned right across from Spring Hill High School, which fit right in with the long-term master plan use. So again, I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I guess to answer, the short answer, of course, is yes. And as we begin to implement the plan, success breeds success. Some of that low-hanging fruit I was talking about, and we feel like that the entrepreneurs that Ms. Fish talked about, the private business owners, the large landowners in our town, and business people will want to be involved once they see the kind of success I think we can have. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yes, you do.
Any last question? One?
My question, Mr. Willard, has there been any consideration or concern about the new heavier waste trucks affecting the residential streets? After watching them, and I see a 20-ton heavier truck in our street, there's some evidence already that wear and tear is showing up.
Yes, sir. I know obviously the heavier equipment and machinery does take a heavier toll on the streets, and we're going to certainly be watching that. We have a pavement management program where every street in the city of Longview, every 2 years, is evaluated, and they have criteria, and we can really determine what the wear and tear and those things are. So I know that the heavier trucks do that. We are still working out the bugs on the new system. And I know it's been some inconvenience for a lot of people, and we apologize for that, but I think we're getting there. And it's definitely showing up in the landfill costs that we're going to be saving. With people on the recycling end of it, Sean, how much have we reduced already the landfill, the tonnage?
Recycling is double.
Yeah. And so, okay, so the recyclable material stays out of the landfill because they charge us by the ton going into the landfill, and we take that and they pay us at the recycling center. So we are going to hopefully be seeing our landfill costs go down as a result of that. But we're still working the bugs out of it, trying to get the routes just right. And for those that still want to put their bags out like we did it in the old, before this, then we're still providing that service as well.
I have something for the street question. Seems to me, I remember Mr. Archer, when he made the presentation to the council, that was considered. He actually mentioned in one of the presentations that these trucks were heavier, but our roads were built to a certain specification and were strong enough already under the current, whatever specification is, to handle the additional weight. That was one of the things that we actually talked about in his presentation. So if you're seeing something different on your street and you suspect it has something to do with the sanitation, we need to hear about it. But I do remember Mr. Archer, when he made his presentation, that was part of it. And then on the landfill, I know our goal is to get to 20% of all trash to be recycled. And we were at about 4 or 5%, and we've almost doubled that up to 10%. So we're halfway there. You know, other communities, and I'm not talking about the San Franciscos of the world, I'm talking about, you know, normal people like those that live in Texas. You know, we can get to 20%, and that reduces your taxes, helps us hold down the cost of what we have to charge for the trash and water pickup. So again, we're halfway there. So keep saving and throwing those bottles and plastic bottles away in your recycling. But if you see something different on the roads, we need to hear about it.
All right, I got one last comment, and I'll get one last question. Comment is, personally, from my viewpoint, I think the best deal I have with the city is the trash sanitation guys. I've seen them run down the street to pick bags up, meet you halfway up the driveway. Pass along my personal thank you to your sanitation guys. They're extremely hard working.
Let me ask you. I had one of my constituents, an older woman, who called me up and said, I can't carry that big old thing down my driveway. If that's the case, call sanitation. It will come up, it will get your bucket, and they will drive it, pull it down to the street for you. We have that kind of sanitation department, as Mike said. So don't hesitate to do that if you feel like you're not able to carry that, or you have a relative that's not able to do that.
Speaking of the garbage trucks, in my neighborhood, they come down our alley, and we are personally responsible for keeping the alley. We've had to pay to have it paved ourselves. So when ours is torn up, what do we have to come back to?
You and Robin Wood?
No, I live off of Gilman Road in between the two churches, the Christian and the Presbyterian church.
My preacher lives in Robin Wood. He's already been on me about the same thing.
So when ours is torn up, then we have to repave it ourselves.
Who wants that one? You got the short straw, okay.
If I could get your address, I'd like to look into it further. But is it a publicly dedicated alleyway?
No, well,
It's a private.
It's a private.
Okay.
Yeah, but they
And,
come down our alley.
In most areas, and we don't have a lot of alleys, publicly dedicated alleys, in Longview. Now, where I moved from, all the alleys were publicly dedicated, but it's not the case in Longview except for certain areas. But I'm sure it's a private drive area,
Yes.
and it's responsible for the homeowners.
We've already had it repaved one time since I've
Okay.
been there.
Well, if I could get your address and your name and number, I'd like to check into that a little further,
All
get
right.
a better
Well,
answer for you.
He's got to go out that door right there. You stand there and you're going to get him.
I'll be right
Since
back.
I'm out of questions, I'm gonna come and get your,
I'll make the last question just real quick. I'm not sure who would answer this. I didn't hear anything about education thrown into the plan, the comprehensive plan. We have UT Longview. Is that rolled into the plan? Is that not? Is that a separate issue?
Well, you probably want to hear from everybody on that issue, and this is why. When our groups came together, we brought a lot of issues forward that we wanted to see addressed, and we wanted a master plan to address them. We realized that a lot of the things we wanted addressed were sort of beyond what we really asked our city staff and elected officials to manage. I brought forward several issues related to social issues like mental health and crime issues and things that really do need to be addressed, but they don't necessarily need to be in the comprehensive plan, which addresses more mundane issues of what the city government can do. So I've been assured by my friends on the committee who are city staff and elected officials that these topics like education and mental health and criminal activity and various other cultural things will be addressed in various other task force. And I have already volunteered to sit on some, and if these are passion points for you, like education and school districts and whatever, you too volunteer, because that's the voices that are going to make the difference.
Yeah, I'll echo what she said. Kimberly, that same question that you had, David and I sat down with her and we answered that specifically because were some of the first meetings on comprehensive plan, education kept coming up over and over again. In particular, when you think about Longview, we have 4 school districts within our community. And so some of the things that came up with, okay, what can we do with regard to things like collaboration and things like improving overall community for those schools? And it really is something that's kind of outside the bounds of what our original intent was for the comprehensive plan. But it doesn't mean that we can't look at ways that those things can be addressed over time. It's just not the core issue of some of those